Hi everyone, hope you're all having a great day. And in today's video, I'm going to talk about BlackBerry stock, more specifically in terms of the IPO for the IoT portion of the business. This is the recap / review of the Q&A that they had on October 17th, 2023. This is for the Project Imperium review. I'm going to go over what the Project Imperium is, what was mentioned in the Q&A, what was the questions and answers themselves in terms of review process, recap, and then also it was mentioned about the Intel / Mobileye direction in terms of the IPO split for that portion, and it was compared. So I'm going to do a comparison as well, evaluation, and show you how the share price moved. So hopefully you like the video, hopefully find it interesting. If you do, consider dropping a like. It does help the channel, so thank you so much for that. And if you want to be notified when I do upload my next video, consider subscribing or following so you can be notified when I do upload the next video. And that's going to be in terms of the next earnings, revenue, expectations, and comparisons, and so on and so forth. Before I continue, like always, I'm not a financial advisor, so please do your own due diligence and research before buying and selling. And I do own shares in BlackBerry, so be aware of that as well while you're listening, and so on and so forth. So the first thing is Project Imperium. It was announced on May 1st. It's essentially basically a review, and they retained leading advisors to find out how to increase the current shareholders' value for the current shareholders in terms of share price. So performed rigorous, detailed evaluation of strategic alternatives. They came up with the idea of separating the IoT portion of the business and the cybersecurity business into two independently operated entities, and they determined that was the optimal strategic direction for BlackBerry. Project Imperium objectives remaining ongoing in parallel, which is awesome. So that means they're not just stopping with the IPO idea; they're still investigating additional directions as well to bring value to current shareholders. So that's awesome. Next thing was they basically stated that the IoT portion of the business is profitable, so that's a good thing. That will help with the evaluation in terms of what the share price could be for the IoT portion, which is important because that will bring value to the current shareholders as well, and I'll explain that further in the video as well. They said it's strong, profitable, so on and so forth, and then there's a lot of upside. For example, the IoT portion has the IV/cloud, which IV could be a great revenue generating machine, but it's still in the early phases, mind you. And then the IPO of IoT will unlock value for existing BlackBerry shareholders, greater visibility for capital markets to IoT financials, profile, and performance, increased operational and capital allocation flexibility for both cyber and IoT, and allows greater focus on profitability of cyber business. Currently targeting a subsidiary IPO, which is important because subsidiary means that the current shareholders in terms of the company itself, so the company itself right now in ticker symbol BB, will own a portion of the IoT business. It's only going to be IPOing a small portion of the IoT business as new share / new ticker symbol. Just mind you that. And I'm going to explain what the percentage they're targeting as well. I'm going to go over that percentage as well because it was mentioned and it was asked, so on and so forth. So in terms of the Q&A, they are already separating the financials, and it seems like the IPO process will take about 9 months from what John Chen heard. So expect around June timeframe for the potential IPO, give or take a month or two. And then John Chen said the cybersecurity side hasn't been growing, but they are working on it, and basically talked about how they are doing more than competitors, but the problem is not being evaluated correctly in the market. At the same time, revenue is declining, so you can't really blame the market in a way until you see revenue growth. So it's just like, yeah, the products are there, they're doing more hypothetically. It's just until the revenue comes in, it won't be evaluated correctly, which does tie to another point in terms of they were offered to be bought out as a company as a whole, but I'll elaborate more of that a little bit in the next slide because that was mentioned as well. So planning to have 2 boards and 2 management teams. That's what they're trying to do with this IPO split in terms of splitting the company, which is ideal because in terms of let's just say entrepreneurship in general, a lot of entrepreneurs tend to be successful once they focus on let's just say you're having a meal and there's the entree and then the desserts and all that stuff, etc., and or the sides, right? Until you focus on the entree, one direction, one goal, that's when entrepreneurs tend to be more successful as opposed to focusing on a lot of projects. Because it's just too hard that way. So when you have 2 management teams, one for one business, one for the other business, it's a lot more easier for them to make their business more profitable right? Basically, as opposed to two companies at the same time profitable. So the IoT portion is already profitable, so that's good. Except cybersecurity has been draining funds. That's a downfall. So hopefully that management team does a good job when the split happens. But basically says the two businesses will naturally be intertwined regardless, since IoT will need cybersecurity either way. So the partnership would form, it would be there regardless. And the reason why that's stated is because if they were to do a spinoff, so subsidiary is the current company as it stands owns a portion of the IPO anyway, regardless. But if it was a spinoff, it would be a complete split, and the IoT business would be on its own, and whatever funds are raised from the IPO would be sent back to the current company. And hypothetically, that valuation, the valuation of the company as it stands right now, would be hypothetically the same, but it would be a little bit raised, obviously, because it depends on the street evaluation of the IoT business. The problem is it would be too early in the phase, because if Ivy is just still getting started in terms of revenue growth, then you wouldn't have the same valuation as you expect in the future as to if the company was worth that much, if that makes sense. So that's a downfall if it was a spinoff. But I'm going to mention something that was mentioned in terms of Q&A and spinoff. The Q&A later on, that was quite asked a little bit about a spinoff. So wants both businesses portions to stand on their own financially. Like I mentioned, cybersecurity is losing money, so they want both sides to be profitable and stand on their own instead of one subsidizing the other. So it kind of sounded like the IoT portion of the business was subsidizing the cybersecurity side, and I think that was mentioned in the last conference call, by the way, as well. And then it was asked how the split would be. So I'm just going to mention like the quote, hypothetically what was asked or stated, and then I'm going to mention the percentages. So a portion of the IoT business is what will be IPO'd in terms of shares, and these proceeds generated will come into BlackBerry, and then we'll decide what they will do with the money, kind of thing. So the funds. So they could put it into R&D and so on and so forth. I don't think they'll necessarily put it into R&D, because they mentioned that they've already allocated too much funds in R&D, grew quite a bit in terms of products, and now they're pretty much stopped there. I think it was mentioned here, or it was mentioned in the next slide, so I'll go over that soon. So John Chen gets asked later on about the percentage as well, and he said initially they were thinking 20 to 30%, mentions Intel and Mobileye as an example. What happened, except Intel and Mobileye wasn't 20 to 30%. That's kind of a little bit on the high side, it seems like, but you could expect that the current company as it stands will own either 70 or 80% of the IoT portion of the business still, so that's good. So again, if Ivy grows and we see massive growth in revenue, the current company as it stands will also benefit as well, a good portion of it. And also seems like a spin-off direction doesn't seem impossible. So he mentioned that the spin-off direction in terms of companies splitting completely, it's not impossible, but from what he said, it was not their initial plan. An initial plan is a subsidiary like Intel did with Mobileye. And I'll go over that as well in terms of split, what happened with Intel and Mobileye. John Chen's contract also was mentioned or asked about, and renewal is still unknown. Now, if we go to the next slide, John Chen was asked and said that cybersecurity is essentially losing money still. That's the downfall. But what happened was they were given an offer to buy out the company, or potentially the cybersecurity side, but it seemed like it was the company. But he said because it's losing money, there's no better team for it to have the company raise the revenue over time than them. So whoever's offering to buy the company is essentially going to naturally give a lowball offer. So he basically said that the past offer that we heard as rumors essentially got turned down just naturally because of the lowball offer. He didn't actually say that, but it just between the lines, you could sense it. He said shareholders would prefer us to grow the company first and then sell it, which I agree. If you could grow the company and show that there's increase in revenue quarter after quarter, the valuation would be a lot higher, and then the current shareholders will get a lot more money, bang for the buck, basically, right? I wouldn't want them to sell it when the revenue is declining, because regardless, whatever offer they're going to get, I don't think shareholders would necessarily benefit at all, because it would be such a low offer. And then also they said that they were running through cash pretty fast, but that was because they were investing heavily to grow their products, which they've done. And essentially they said that they're almost done that fully. But this is what was not planned for them in terms of the long-term sense, and will soon be done burning through cash moving forward. So that's good. So hopefully, in terms of revenue growth for the company, we'll start seeing that turn around. And they mentioned a time frame for that towards the end of the Q&A, which I think is one of these points right here. So I'll go over that soon. I know I keep saying that. Sorry about that. No plans to sell small assets for cash, but planning to lower losses soon. Because I was asked, what about other assets? Do you guys expect to sell them? They're like, no, but we're going to lower losses and like burn through less cash. Plans to monetize remaining IP, so patents themselves. They have remaining patents. They're planning to monetize them, and that's in the works right now, which is awesome. They expect Q4 to be the highest revenue quarter, even when the strikes impact possibly. Interesting for sure. So Q4, that's coming up. So that's right now is Q3 is coming up. The next one's Q4, which will be announced in March 2024. And they're expecting to be this highest revenue quarter they've had for quite some time. They're saying that's regardless, or John Chen stated that this is regardless of the strikes that are happening in the automotive industry. If you're aware that there's potential strikes and so on and so forth. So even if it happens, doesn't matter. This Q4 will be the highest revenue quarter for quite some time. S1 will have more info in terms of IoT evaluation. So this is like the bankers report, and is expected to be published maybe a little bit after March of 2024. This will have the valuation of IoT, how much it is evaluated, which is important because I will show you the Mobileye evaluation as well in terms of how much it was evaluated for the Intel and Mobileye split. Also, Amazon AWS is treating Ivy very seriously, from what John Chen stated. So showing that there's a lot of promise for Ivy, but mind you, Amazon is a 50% partner, like in terms of partnership, 50% of Ivy. So obviously they're gonna put a lot of effort towards Ivy. So I don't know if that statement is necessarily a strong statement, but Amazon's a massive company regardless, and the fact that they're taking it seriously when they could just put it on the side, because I'm sure they invest a lot and try to take on new ventures, but then if they're not showing any fruits to their labor kind of thing, they're willing to cut them off instead of just keep dumping funds into them. So that is a little bit promising at the same time. Now, in terms of the cybersecurity side, in terms of it being profitable, they were asked when you expect it to be profitable. And they said they're hopefully expecting to be profitable by next fiscal year, or at least break even by next fiscal year. And they're targeting this in terms of the short term to make profits, not like in terms of the long term. So they're trying to make profits as soon as possible, obviously. That's hopefully the case always, right? Now, in terms of Mobileye and Intel, the IPO. So it was announced in December 2021 that Intel will do an IPO for Mobileye. So Mobileye is a company that develops autonomous driving technologies and advanced driver assistance systems, so ADAS, including cameras, computer chips, and software, which is nice because this is in the same realm as the Ivy system in terms of Ivy does the software portion, so it's not obviously all this, but it's a good comparison, right? Now, Intel did acquire Mobileye in 2017 for $15.3 billion. I remember at the same time, analysts weren't expecting a valuation this high, but because they're in autonomous vehicles or in vehicles in general, it is a valuable asset, and Intel saw that. But the reason why I'm mentioning that is because Ivy in general and IoT, there's a lot of a collaboration in terms of vehicle stuff, so the valuation could be high. Hopefully it is, fingers crossed. That'd be great for current shareholders for sure. But at the same time, revenue is growing, so that's good, and it is profitable, but hopefully it goes even higher during the evaluation in terms of the next quarters and so on and so forth, so we could get the max evaluation as much as possible. Now, in terms of IPO, that was announced on December 2021 that they're going to IPO Mobileye, and the percentage split, it looks like it was roughly about 11%, because in 2023 Intel owns almost 89% of Mobileye. So current company as it stands, Intel still owns about 89% as of June 6, 2023. Now, there was another thing that was mentioned, or I want to go over. The valuation for the company for the IPO was $17 billion. So this is when it was IPO'd, as first launch of the IPO, right? So $17 billion. Remember, they bought it for $15.3 billion. So it didn't make much hypothetically in terms of valuation growth. But the day it IPO'd, the share price went from $21 as initial, like the IPO price was $21. It went up to $27.85 on Wednesday, and that's a 37% increase, which is awesome. In terms of how much they raised from the IPO, like Intel got, they raised $820 million. Now, in terms of how the stock performed, if we look at the announcement time frame, December, essentially it hovered around the $49 price point, and depending on when it announced, either went up to $54 right about here, or later on in January 18th or 14th, so on and so forth, January 5th, it went up to $56. So it seemed like it was received well. In terms of earnings, Intel wasn't doing that great, to be honest. Here was decent, I think, but then revenue was declining quite a bit here. So if we look at revenue here, estimated was 18.3. They reported 18.3, so that's fine technically. But then here, expected was 17.9 billion, but they got 15.3 billion. So the stock dropped quite a bit. And then right about here, expected 15.2, and then they got 15.3. So that is a surprise. But the problem is, if you look at the revenues, it was constantly dropping 18, 15, 15, and then 14 here, so on and so forth. So the stock wasn't doing great for revenue time frame. But if you look at the IPO, when it IPO'd, which is October 26, 2022, the share price was give or take about $26, whatever it might have been, 25, so on and so forth, around that ballpark. And then in November timeframe, November 16th, it was at $31. So not a major jump, but a decent amount of a pop overall for the share price. So it seems like it's okay. It's just not much for the share price, too much. But we'll see how that happens for BlackBerry, how they deal with it, how much the valuation is. Because mind you, for the IoT portion of the business for BlackBerry, actually I could pull it up right now. For BlackBerry stock, the market cap overall, so includes cybersecurity and IoT portion of the business. And right now, with the current share price of $3.44 American US, the company is evaluated at $2 billion, pretty much clean right there. So $2 billion valuation, hypothetically pretty low, but at the same time, revenue has to climb. Well, it doesn't have to climb necessarily, because sometimes with multiples and new IPOs and so on and so forth and startup companies, the valuations multiples are pretty high overall. So we'll see how it plays out for BlackBerry, since it could be hypothetically undervalued based off what they said as well in previous conference calls and / the Q&A. But yeah, hopefully you like the video. Hopefully you enjoy it. If you do, consider dropping a like. It helps the channel, so thank you so much for that. And then if you have any questions, let me know. I'll try to answer them as soon as possible. I sometimes delayed on the questions, sometimes delayed on the video, so I apologize for that. But I do get to almost all of them, I think, or if not all of them, within the next few days or weeks and all that stuff. So again, yeah, sorry for the delay, but thanks again for the awesome support. Appreciate it. And I'll see you next video. Thanks again. Peace.